Hi guys, my name is Deshanique Mills, and as my partner Brooke has already told you what eugenics is and or was, I will be going over stories told by those who were affected by this era in time. Eugenics policies were first implemented in early 1900s in the United States, but did you know it also took root in France, Germany, and Great Britain? Then later in 1920s and 1930s, eugenics policies sterilizing certain mental patients were implemented in other countries including Belgium, Brazil, Canada, Japan, and Sweden. Now you'll be hearing the story about Jeanette Ingram. Her sterilization took place in the late 1950s under a 1907 law that mandated the compulsory sterilization of promiscuous, defective, epileptic, and feeble minded women, a diagnosis Jeanette received at 22 months old. Over 60,000 women and many men share Jeanette's story. Compulsory sterilization in the United States caused thousands of women to be forcibly abducted from their homes, confined in institutions, and operated upon without their consent, all because the state deemed them unfit to reproduce. We are quick to condemn Hitler, but we forget it was our own country that inspired him. The United States was the first nation in the world to pass a compulsory sterilization law in 1907, far before the rise of Nazi Germany. Over 60,000 disabled minority and working class women were adopted, drugged, and sterilized in state funded hospitals under this law. The practice of involuntary sterilization was so common that it became the Mississippi appendectomy. This involuntary sterilization procedure performed under the guise of healthcare were especially common for poor African American women. Psychology has a fascinating and rich history filled with amazing advances, but it wasn't all progress. One of the most devastating times in psychology was a movement called eugenics, a name coined by Sir Francis Galton in 1883, of course. Now, state governments soon started establishing sterilization laws. In 1907, Indiana was the first state to legalize sterilization. While sterilization laws were in place in many states, they weren't really used. According to Harry H. Luglin, director of the Eugenics Record Office and a major player in the eugenics movement, that was because the laws were either too confusing or too poorly written to be constitutional. So in 1922, he published a Model Sterilization Act, which later became the model for many states. By the 1930s, over 30 states had sterilization laws. Some states even expanded the definition to include blindness, deafness, drug addiction, and alcoholism. In 1924, Virginia passed a sterilization law based on Luglin's model. In 1927, Carrie Buck was the first person to be sterilized in the state under the new law, which included sterilizing anyone who was feeble-minded or imbecile or epileptic. The Supreme Court upheld the decision in Buck versus Bell, validating sterilization and increasing sterilization throughout the country. Carrie's mother, Emma Buck, was deemed feeble-minded and sexually promiscuous. She was institutionalized in the Virginia colony for epileptics and feeble-minded in Lynchburg, Virginia. The then 17-year-old Carrie, believed to have inherited these same traits, and was committed to the same asylum after giving birth to her daughter, Vivian. Now, when the case went to the Supreme Court, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote, "It is better for all of the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifesting unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough." Now he knew that was wrong. The whole case was a conspiracy. Recent scholarship has shown that Carrie Buck's sterilization was based on false diagnosis, and her defense lawyer conspired with the lawyer for the Virginia colonies to guarantee that the sterilization law would be upheld in court. And also the fact that immense facts were withheld from the court, such as the fact that Carrie was raped by her foster family. Now, I believe that they withheld that information because they knew that it would bring shame upon the family. After Carrie was sterilized, she was released from the institution. She was married twice and lived until her 70s, helping to care for others. Since then, 65,000 Americans with mental illness or developmental disabilities have been sterilized. And in 1938, Joseph S. DeJarnett, the director of Western State Hospital in Virginia, expressed his disappointment at the fact that Germany in 6 years sterilized about 80,000 of her unfit, while the United States, with approximately twice the popularity, has only sterilized about 27,869 people. Now, that in itself is crazy. Now, guys, it's many stories out there of the horrors that these people have committed. In this picture, you can see Dr. Berger, who is a racial anthropologist who worked for the NRAB, a project in Nazi Germany to research the archaeological and cultural history of the Aryan race. He's measuring a Tibetan woman's head to demonstrate what he believed was the inferior characteristic of her race. Can you believe that? Here are various types of Indian dwarfs and giants photographed by the Eugenics Society to demonstrate how humans could be selectively bred to control size in 1912. As these photos make clear, for nearly 100 years, eugenics was much more than a German idea. Many parts of the world were complicit. Now, in this image from 1912, a British family of children born from rickets is photographed by the Eugenics Society to demonstrate their condition is hereditary and could be controlled through selective breeding. A photograph of Fitch Henry Leon, a convicted criminal with the measurements of his various body parts in Paris in 1902. And there's also pictures that show the common faces of criminality and disease taken from inquiries into human faculty and its development in 1883. Now, I know I threw a lot of information at you, but to sum it all up, eugenics was everywhere, not only in the United States, but certain parts of the world. These people that committed these heinous acts were only trying to have population control, but used eugenics as its cover story. I believe that as young women and young men, we must be aware of such acts that have been committed against us. We must always teach ourselves to always ask questions, especially when at the doctor's office. Even if it seems stupid, always ask questions and always be aware of not only your surroundings but also of any documents and contracts you sign. Even if you are unsure what the words mean, take advantage and either ask them to redraft the document and put it in words that you understand, or take it to a lawyer that deals in that particular case and help you understand what you're reading and what you're looking at. Okay? Thanks, you guys. I hope you learned something new like I did.